morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? I got a little extra time, so I just wanted to give a shout out first to Christine San Juan, wherever she is, if she's in the room. Where is she? Over there. Thank you very much. As you know, I've been in charge of the hospitality suite all week, and it's an exhausting job for an old guy like me. And last night, she allowed me to go home at midnight so that I could get some sleep, so that I could come up here and talk to you guys about what I want to talk to you about today. And of course, Cindy as well, in helping to make sure that everything got closed down, and those volunteers that helped to go through that process. So I wanted to take time today to talk to you a little bit about why your organization should be closing the leadership gap. DiscoverLink is in a unique position. We work with we've been in the restaurant industry space now for over 12 years. We work with over 85 restaurant organizations. And we have the pleasure of working with a lot of the training professionals like you here in the room. And because of that, we're able to gain a lot of knowledge and experience. And we're able to take that and understand what are some of the common threads and trends that happen out in the industry. And the good news was yesterday, as I was sitting here in the Technomic presentation, I realized that a lot of the things that we're seeing out there was coming up in the results in the Technomic presentation. So what we're seeing out there right now is that there's really two areas that most of the organizations are focusing on. They're focusing on hourly training as well as MIT training. And we all understand why. The hourly training is our biggest audience. It has the largest turnover. We've got to get our compliance training done. We've got to get our skill position training done. So we have to go through that process. And then from an MIT standpoint, we understand that we've got to take internal candidates, external candidates, we've got to put them through the process, we've got to get them indoctrinated into our methodologies, and we have to get them shift ready. But what I want to talk to you about today is really how do we take a high-performing assistant manager and move him into a very successful GM role. So in order to do that, I'm going to take a step back. A few years ago, we had the opportunity, DiscoverLink, along with Steinbrecher and Associates, of working with three national restaurant chains out there. TGI Fridays, Ted's Montana Grill, and the folks at Bob Evans. And so when we sat down with them, the first thing we wanted to do is understand what did they think about their GMs. And here's some of the things that we heard. Our GMs just aren't the same as they were 5 to 10 years ago. They don't understand HR. Are any of you in the room saying some of these things within your organizations right now? I used to have a boss that used to tell me hope is not a strategy, so this is one of my favorites. We assume that a great AGM should become at least a good GM. Bottom line is, we understood that there was a leadership gap within these organizations, and they needed to address it. But bottom line, it was also an opportunity for training to get involved. So the first thing that we did is we went to the assistant general managers that had failed within those organizations and went through a process of asking them what they thought. And what they said to us is, hey, we thought that we had the skills to be successful as a general manager. We thought that what we did as an assistant general manager would translate to a successful general manager. The other thing that they told us, which was probably the key and critical thing, is we really got no training. We really weren't prepared to move into the GM role. What happened was they decided to move me into a store. They gave me a little orientation. They gave me a tour of the store. They gave me a set of the keys. And they said, go ahead, rock and roll. It's time to go. So we decided that we had to take a step back, and we had to really work with these organizations to understand what was the success of what was a successful GM within their organization. So what we did is we sat down with 20 regional VPs, 60 district managers, and we identified the competencies and the tasks that were most important that were the traits within their most successful general managers. And then we took those and we ordered them by frequency, importance, and difficulty. So once we went through that process, we were then able to evaluate that against the assistant general manager and realize that there was several findings that came away from that. So the first thing that we uncovered is there are some new competencies that have come along in the last 5 to 10 years. Things like technology and, sorry about that, preventive measures and policies and procedures. So we realized there was some new things that came along. But the other part of this that we understood was that within the key 9 competencies, there was deficiencies in skills that needed to be elevated in order to prepare them to become a general manager. And what we heard from them is, unless the GM taught them, they didn't learn it. So unless they had a high-performing GM that was giving them that information, they weren't learning it and they weren't prepared. The other thing that we learned was the assistant managers didn't run the stores like they owned them. They said to us that, it was the GM store. If they wanted to get us involved, we would get involved. If they didn't want us to get involved, we wouldn't get involved. So those things that they needed to learn and to know, they weren't getting. So you're probably saying, what was the impact of that? Well, it wasn't very good. The impact was those stores had lower sales, lower profits. A lot of the key process indicators that they looked at as organizations were down, and they realized they had to take a look at those. The second thing was it was detrimental to the employee. In a lot of cases, they were either fired or they were demoted. And bottom line is, of the internal candidates, assistant managers, they moved into the GM role, 65% of them failed. So now you're probably saying to me, what are the underdeveloped competencies? Well, I'm going to share those with you. They're going up on the board here. And it's important for you to understand that, yes, we do teach a lot of these competencies within our MIT training, but at some point in time, there's higher level skills that they need to learn in order to prepare them to become a GM. So if you take human resource management, they may be able to hire, to interview, to hire, but some of those higher level skills just aren't there for them. So at DiscoverLink, we like to benchmark and help build ROI for the organizations we work with. So we took a look at those organizations and took a look at their success rate prior to implementing anything against those 9 competencies. And as I'd mentioned before, we were about 65% success rate. So then we turned around and we created some programs for them, along with in-market activities that they had to do, and developed a full leadership plan for their organizations. And when that was complete, we were able to get a 95% success rate. So bottom line, there's a few things that I want you to take away from today's presentation. Don't overlook the critical leadership gap. It's important for you within your organizations to understand that, like Technomics says, you can spend a lot of money on the hourlies and the MITs, but you have to make sure that you have the bench strength within your organization to develop the leadership strength within your organization. The second thing is the GM is the most important role in your restaurant. If you take that money that you said from the Technomics information and you spend it with your hourlies and your MITs, and you put them into a store with a low-performing GM, the impact of the dollars that you just spent on your MITs and hourlies isn't realized. So it's very important that you take the time to make sure that you have those high-performing GMs to get the biggest value out of where you're spending your training dollars right now. And last but not least, if you're in an organization that's looking to grow, this has to be a top priority. If operations is coming to you and saying, hey, we need to open 1 store, 5 stores, 10 stores, whatever it may be within your organization, you need to make sure that you're prepared and that you've put a plan in place to develop the leadership within your organization to make sure that you reach the goals of your organization. Thank you.